My family looked down on me for years. So, when I revealed I secretly got married, had a baby, and built my own life without them, they were shocked, tried to reconnect, but I let them taste their own medicine. The smell of cinnamon and pine needles should have made me feel warm and nostalgic, but instead, it made my stomach churn as I sat at my grandmother's dining table, surrounded by the people who had spent the last decade making me feel like a disappointment. The Christmas china gleamed under the chandelier, each piece perfectly placed, just like everything else in Grandma Helen's house, just like everything else in our family, where appearances mattered more than truth. My sister Jessica sat across from me, one hand resting protectively on her barely there bump, the other picking delicately at her glazed ham. At 4 months pregnant, she was glowing in that way that made everyone coo and fuss over her. Mom sat to her right, beaming with pride every time she looked at Jessica's stomach. Dad carved the turkey with the same methodical precision he used for everything else in his life. And there was Grandma Helen, the matriarch of our little dysfunction, holding court at the head of the table. "Sally, dear, you've barely touched your food," Grandma Helen said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant criticism was coming. "You're getting so thin. No wonder you can't find a nice man to settle down with." I forced a smile and took a bite of mashed potatoes. "I'm fine, Grandma, just not that hungry." Speaking of settling down, Jessica piped up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Did I tell you all about the baby shower Mom threw for me last weekend? It was absolutely perfect. The decorations, the games, the cake, everything was just magical." Mom practically glowed. "Oh, it really was beautiful. We had about 30 people there, all bringing such lovely gifts. The nursery is going to be absolutely stunning." I kept my expression neutral, even though the words stung. I hadn't been invited to Jessica's baby shower. Not that I was surprised. I'd been systematically excluded from family events for years now, ever since I'd chosen a different path than what they'd mapped out for me. "The photos are gorgeous," Dad added, pulling out his phone. "Here, Sally, let me show you." I dutifully looked at the pictures, making appropriate sounds of admiration while my heart twisted. There was Mom, radiant as she helped Jessica open presents. There was Jessica, surrounded by friends and family, laughing at some joke. There were all my cousins, aunts, and family friends I'd grown up with, all celebrating my sister's joy. I'd only found out about the shower through my cousin Lisa's Instagram story the day after it happened. A casual post of her and Jessica, laughing over baby gifts that felt like a punch to the gut. And there was the empty space where I should have been. "It's beautiful," I said, handing the phone back. "Looks like everyone had a wonderful time." "Oh, they did," Jessica said, her hand moving to her belly again. "Everyone was so excited about the baby." Aunt Margaret said, "It's about time someone in our generation started contributing to the family legacy." The dig was subtle but clear. At 32, I was a family failure, unmarried, childless, living in a small apartment in the city while working as a freelance graphic designer. I wasn't a lawyer like Jessica, wasn't married to a successful businessman like Jessica, and clearly wasn't contributing to the precious family legacy like Jessica. "Speaking of family legacy," Grandma Helen said, setting down her wine glass with a decisive clink, "your sister's baby shower was just perfect. Now, when will you finally start a family?" The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to drop. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the annual Christmas inquisition about my life choices. Usually I deflected with jokes or changed the subject, but something about the way they'd all been talking about Jessica's shower, the way they deliberately excluded me and then rubbed it in my face, made something snap inside me. I smiled. The kind of smile I perfected over years of dealing with difficult clients and passive-aggressive family members. "I did start a family, Grandma. I just didn't invite anyone who treats me like a failure." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Grandma Helen's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, and then something that looked almost like fear. The fork in her hand trembled slightly before she set it down. "What do you mean?" Mom asked, her voice careful and controlled. I took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. "I mean exactly what I said. I have a family now, a husband who adores me, and a beautiful baby girl who just turned 6 months old." The explosion was immediate. "What?" Jessica shrieked, her carefully composed facade cracking. "That's impossible. You would have told us. You would have invited us to the wedding. Would I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "When was the last time any of you showed genuine interest in my life? When was the last time you included me in anything important?" Dad leaned forward, his face red. "Sally, if this is some kind of joke, it's not a joke, Dad." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my photos. Her name is Emma. She was born on June 15th. She has her daddy's eyes and apparently my stubborn streak. I turned the phone around, showing them a picture of my daughter, their granddaughter, and niece. A beautiful baby with dark curls and bright blue eyes, sitting in a high chair with food smeared across her cheeks, grinning at the camera. I'd had the photos ready on my phone for weeks, knowing this moment would come eventually. The silence stretched on as they all stared at the photo. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to process what I just told them. "This is ridiculous," Jessica finally said, but her voice was shaky. "You can't just have a secret baby and not tell your family, can't I?" I asked. "You had a secret baby shower and didn't tell me. Seems like we're even." "That's completely different," Mom snapped. "You're being unreasonable. Am I?" I swiped to another photo. This one of me in a wedding dress standing next to a tall, dark-haired man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "This is my husband, Michael. We got married 16 months ago. It was a beautiful ceremony. Small, intimate, just the people who actually care about us." Grandma Helen's hand was visibly shaking now. "Sally, how could you not tell us? How could you keep something like this from your family?" The hurt in her voice might have moved me once, but not anymore. Not after years of being made to feel like I wasn't good enough. like I was the family disappointment. The same way you kept Jessica's baby shower from me, I said calmly. The same way you've kept me out of family decisions and celebrations for years. The same way you all talk about me, like I'm some kind of cautionary tale when you think I'm not listening. We never, Dad started to protest, but I cut him off. Yes, you did. You all did. Every holiday, every family gathering, it's the same thing. When is Sally going to get married? When is Sally going to have babies? When is Sally going to get a real job? When is Sally going to stop being such a disappointment? I stood up from the table, my hands surprisingly steady. Well, congratulations. I did all of those things. I found love. I got married. I had a baby. And I built a successful business. I just did it without you. Jessica was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But we're family. You should have told us. Family? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. When have you ever treated me like family, Jessica? When have any of you made me feel like I belonged here? I swiped to another photo on my phone. This one from Emma's christening. Michael and I were standing at the altar with our daughter, surrounded by his family, my college friends, and the people I'd chosen to be my real family. This is Emma's christening, I said, showing them the picture. It was beautiful. Michael's parents were so excited to have their first grandchild. My friends threw me the most amazing baby shower. They decorated my apartment with handmade decorations and brought thoughtful gifts they'd saved up for. People who actually cared about me celebrated the biggest moments of my life. Mom was crying now, too. Sally, please, we do care about you. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because love isn't just words, Mom. It's actions. It's inclusion. It's showing up for someone even when they don't fit into your perfect picture of what they should be. I put my phone away and picked up my purse. I need to get home. My family is waiting for me. Your family is here, Grandma Helen said desperately. No, I said, walking toward the door. My family is a man who tells me I'm beautiful when I'm covered in baby spit up and haven't showered in 2 days. My family is a little girl who lights up when she sees me walk into a room. My family is people who celebrate my successes instead of questioning my choices. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the 4 people who had shaped so much of my life and so much of my pain. For what it's worth, I said, I would have loved to share these moments with you. I dreamed about calling Mom when I found out I was pregnant. I imagined Dad walking me down the aisle. I pictured Grandma Helen holding Emma for the first time, but you all made it very clear that I wasn't good enough as I was. So, I found people who thought I was perfect exactly as I am. The drive home was a blur of tears and Christmas lights. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the small house Michael and I had bought 8 months ago, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from family members. I ignored them all. Michael met me at the door, Emma balanced on his hip. She immediately reached for me, babbling happily, and I felt my heart settle back into place. How did it go? Michael asked, studying my face. I told them, I said, taking Emma and breathing in her sweet baby scent. His eyes widened. Everything. Everything. We talk about this moment for months. Michael had been supportive of my decision to keep our relationship and Emma's birth private, especially after he'd witnessed firsthand how my family treated me at a few gatherings early in our relationship. He'd seen the subtle put-downs, the dismissive comments, the way they made me shrink into myself. How do you feel? He asked, wrapping his arms around both of us. Free? I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in years, I feel free. That evening, while Emma napped, I finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and even a few voicemails. Most were from Mom and Jessica, ranging from angry to desperate to pleading. There were a few from Dad, shorter and more controlled, but equally confused. Even some of my aunts and cousins had somehow gotten word and were reaching out. The first few messages were exactly what I'd expected. Jessica's initial text was pure fury. How dare you embarrass us like that? How could you be so selfish and vindictive? We're your family. But as I scrolled through, I could see the progression of emotions playing out in real time. Her anger gave way to hurt, then desperation, then something that almost looked like self-reflection. Mom's messages were more calculated as always. She'd started with disappointment. Sally, I'm very hurt by your behavior today. This was not the time or place for such an announcement. Then moved to guilt. Your grandmother is beside herself. She's been crying all evening. How could you do this to an elderly woman who loves you? And finally to bargaining. Please call me back. We need to discuss this like adults. Surely we can work this out. Dad's texts were shorter but somehow more painful in their confusion. Don't understand why you felt you couldn't tell us. We would have been happy for you. That one almost broke me because I could hear the genuine bewilderment in his voice. The way he truly didn't understand how their constant criticism and exclusion had pushed me away. But it was Grandma Helen's voicemail that made me pause. Sally, dear. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I've been thinking about what you said today, and I think maybe you're right. I think maybe we haven't been fair to you. I think maybe I haven't been fair to you. Please call me back. I'd very much like to meet my great-granddaughter. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. Not yet. Michael found me sitting on the couch at midnight, still scrolling through messages. Emma finally asleep in her crib upstairs. Still processing? He asked gently, settling beside me. They're acting like I'm the villain, I said, showing him some of the more accusatory texts, like I'm the one who broke the family apart. He read for a few minutes, his jaw tightening. Some of these are pretty harsh. Jessica sent this one an hour ago, I said, pulling up a particularly nasty message. She said I'm a manipulative narcissist who gets off on hurting people and that I've traumatized Grandma Helen. Michael was quiet for a moment. You know that's not true, right? Is it though? The doubt that had been gnawing at me all evening finally spilled out. Maybe I should have found a gentler way to tell them. Maybe I should have called Mom first or sent them photos or Sally. Michael's voice was firm but kind. Do you remember what you were like 3 years ago before we met? I did remember. I'd been anxious all the time, constantly second-guessing myself, apologizing for taking up space. I've been so used to walking on eggshells around my family that I'd started doing it with everyone. You were so worried about disappointing people that you disappoint yourself instead, he continued. You'd say yes to family gatherings that made you miserable, relationships that weren't good for you, job opportunities that didn't pay what you were worth, all because you were afraid of conflict. He was right. I'd spent most of my 20s trying to be the person my family wanted me to be, and it had nearly destroyed my sense of self. What you did today wasn't cruel, Michael said. It was honest, maybe brutally honest, but sometimes that's what it takes to break through years of dysfunction. I curled up against him, feeling some of the tension leave my body. I keep thinking about that look on Grandma Helen's face when I showed them Emma's picture. She looked devastated. She should be devastated, he said. She missed the birth of her great-granddaughter because she made her granddaughter feel like she wasn't good enough to include in family celebrations. That's devastating. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the day settling around us. Finally, Michael spoke again. Do you want to know what I think really happened today? I nodded. I think your family has been living in a fantasy where their behavior toward you was normal, where their criticism was helpful, where excluding you from things was somehow justified. Today, you held up a mirror and showed them the reality of what they've been doing. That's why they're so angry, not because you kept secrets, but because you forced them to confront their own actions. His words resonated with something deep in my chest, a validation I didn't know I'd been craving. The question now, he continued, is what you want to do going forward, because you get to decide, Sally. You get to set the terms. Over the next few days, I thought a lot about Michael's words. The messages kept coming, but they started to change in tone. The anger and accusations gave way to confusion and hurt, and then slowly to something that looked almost like accountability. It was Jessica who surprised me first. 3 days after Christmas, I received a long email from her that was completely different from her initial angry texts. Sally, it began, I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, and I need to apologize, not just for how I reacted that day, but for how I've treated you for years. I keep trying to remember the last time I asked you about your life without following it up with advice you didn't ask for, or criticism about your choices. I can't remember. I keep trying to think of the last time I included you in something important without making you feel like an afterthought. I can't remember that either. The truth is, I've always been jealous of you. You've always been the brave one, the one who wasn't afraid to be different, to take risks, to follow your own path. I chose the safe route, law school, the right husband, the right neighborhood, the right timeline for everything. And instead of admiring your courage, I think I resented it. It was easier to criticize your choices than to examine my own. I'm not excusing my behavior. There's no excuse for making you feel unwelcome at family gatherings, for excluding you from my baby shower. I think I told myself I was protecting you from judgment, but really I was protecting myself from having to defend you to people whose opinions shouldn't matter anyway. I would understand if you don't want to have a relationship with me going forward. I would understand if you never want Emma to know her aunt, but if you're willing to give me a chance to do better, I promise I'll try. I want to be the sister you deserve, not the sister I've been. I read the email 3 times, tears streaming down my face by the end. It wasn't perfect. There were still traces of self-pity and deflection, but it was honest in a way Jessica had never been with me before. Mom's attempt at reconciliation came in the form of a surprise visit. I was folding Emma's laundry when the doorbell rang, and there she was, standing on my doorstep with red eyes and a carefully wrapped gift. I brought something for Emma, she said quietly. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She followed me into the living room where Emma was having tummy time on her playmat. Mom's breath caught when she saw her granddaughter in person for the first time. Oh, Sally, she's perfect. Emma, ever the social butterfly, immediately rolled over and gave Mom one of her heart-melting smiles. Mom knelt down beside the playmat, and Emma reached out to grab her finger. Hello, beautiful girl, Mom whispered. I'm your grandmother. I'm so sorry I missed meeting you when you were born. We sat on the floor together watching Emma play, the silence stretching between us. Finally, Mom spoke. I brought photo albums, she said, pulling out several thick books from her bag. Every picture I have of you growing up, I thought maybe you'd like to share them with Emma someday. Show her what her mama was like as a little girl. I opened one of the albums, and there I was at Emma's age. Same dark curls, same bright eyes, same mischievous grin. You were such a happy baby, Mom said softly. Always smiling, always curious about everything. You started walking at 9 months because you were so determined to explore the world. She turned the page, and there were pictures of my first birthday party, a backyard celebration with a homemade cake and decorations that looked suspiciously similar to the party I'd thrown for Emma. I made that cake from scratch, Mom continued. It took me 3 tries to get the frosting right, but you were so excited about the pink roses I'd piped around the edges. We flipped through years of memories, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, first days of school, dancing recitals, art projects proudly displayed on the refrigerator. In every photo, I looked loved and celebrated. When did it change? I asked quietly. When did you stop seeing me as someone worth celebrating? Mom was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. I think it was when you graduated college and didn't immediately follow the path we'd expected. Jessica went straight to law school, got engaged to Tom, started checking off all the boxes we thought defined success. And you moved to the city, started freelancing, dated people we didn't understand, made choices that scared us. She wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. Instead of trusting that we'd raised you to make good decisions, we panicked. We thought if we kept pushing, kept criticizing, kept pointing out what you weren't doing, somehow we could steer you back to what we thought was the right path. Emma had crawled over to Mom during her speech and was now trying to pull herself up on her legs. Mom lifted her automatically, and Emma settled contentedly in her arms. But look at you, Mom said, her voice full of wonder as she looked around our home at the family photos on the walls, the successful business certificates framed in my office visible through the doorway, the obvious love and care that filled every corner of our space. You built exactly the life you wanted. You found love. You created a career you're passionate about. You're raising this beautiful little girl in a home full of warmth and joy. She looked at me directly for the first time since she'd arrived. We weren't protecting you from making mistakes, Sally. We were trying to protect ourselves from the fear that maybe we didn't know what was best for you after all. It wasn't a complete apology. There were still defensive moments, still traces of the need to justify their behavior, but it was more honest than any conversation we'd had in years. I can't undo the hurt we've caused, Mom continued. I can't go back and invite you to Jessica's baby shower or support your decisions or celebrate your successes the way I should have, but if you let me, I'd like to try to do better going forward. Emma chose that moment to reach up and grab Mom's necklace, babbling happily. Mom laughed, and for a moment, she looked like the mother from those old photo albums, relaxed and joyful and completely enchanted by her child. She's going to be such a heartbreaker, Mom said, just like her mama. The comment should have felt patronizing, but somehow it didn't. Maybe because she was looking at Emma with pure love, the way she used to look at me in those old photos. Dad's approach was predictably different. He showed up the next weekend with a toolbox and a determined expression. Noticed your front step is a little wobbly, he said without preamble. Mind if I fix it? It was such a dad move, expressing emotion through action rather than words. I watched from the kitchen window as he worked, Emma napping peacefully in her bouncy seat beside him on the porch. Michael had gone to run errands, so it was just the three of us. When he finished with the step, he moved on to the squeaky gate, then the loose doorknob on the back door, then a dozen other small repairs I hadn't even noticed needed doing. It was his way of taking care of us, of showing he cared, even when he couldn't find the words. Finally, he came inside, washing his hands at the kitchen sink while I made coffee. House is in good shape, he said, which was high praise from a man who'd spent 40 years in construction management. Your husband knows what he's doing. He does, I agreed. He's handy around the house, good with Emma, works hard at his job. You'd like him if you got to know him. Dad nodded, stirring cream into his coffee. We sat at my small kitchen table. Emma, now awake and entertaining herself in her high chair with some Cheerios. I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, Dad said finally, about us treating you like a failure. I waited, knowing he needed time to work through his thoughts. Thing is, I never thought of you as a failure, he continued. I thought of you as someone who was making things harder for herself than they needed to be. Someone who was choosing the difficult path when there was an easier one available. He watched Emma try to pick up a Cheerio with her tiny fingers, his expression soft. But watching her, he gestured at Emma, thinking about being her grandfather, about what I'd want for her. I realized I'd want her to be brave enough to choose her own path, even if it wasn't the path I would have chosen. It was more emotional openness than I'd seen from Dad in years. I'm proud of you, Sally, he said quietly. I should have said that more. I should have said it when you started your business, when you bought this house, when you found someone who makes you happy. I'm saying it now, even though it's probably too late. It's not too late, I said, surprised by how much his words meant to me. It's not too late for any of it. Emma threw a Cheerio on the floor and clapped her hands, delighted by the sound it made. Dad chuckled, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard him laugh. She's going to be trouble, he said fondly, just like her mama. But unlike Mom's comment, this one felt purely affectionate, the way a grandfather should talk about his granddaughter's spirit. The most surprising response came from people I hadn't expected to hear from at all. Apparently, word of the Christmas drama had spread through the extended family network, and I started receiving messages from cousins, aunts, and family friends I hadn't talked to in years. But these weren't messages of condemnation, they were messages of support. My cousin Rachel, who lived across the country and who I barely saw anymore, sent me a long text. Just heard about what happened at Christmas. Good for you for standing up for yourself. I've been wanting to tell Aunt Helen what I think of her constant comments about my weight for 20 years. My Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, called me directly. Your mother told me what happened. She said, I wanted you to know that I think you were incredibly brave. I also wanted you to know that I never agreed with the way you've been treated at family gatherings. I should have spoken up more. Even Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor from my childhood, somehow got my number and called to tell me she'd always admired my independence and thought my family was too hard on me. It was like my confrontation at Christmas had given other people permission to acknowledge what they'd been seeing all along, that my family's treatment of me hadn't been normal or helpful or kind. The most touching message came from my college roommate, Jenny, who I'd stayed close with over the years. Saw the picture she posted of Emma. She texted, "She's absolutely beautiful. I'm so happy you found your person and created the family you deserve. Also, I'm proud of you for finally telling your birth family the truth about how their behavior affected you. It took guts." Reading all these messages of support made me realize something important. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being oversensitive or dramatic. The people who truly cared about me had been watching my family's behavior for years and had been just as troubled by it as I was. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. Not yet. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Jessica left tearful voicemails apologizing and begging me to bring Emma to meet her. Mom sent long texts explaining how they thought they were being helpful by pushing me to settle down. Dad, true to form, sent shorter messages asking practical questions about when the wedding was and whether I needed anything. But it was the message from my cousin Lisa that surprised me most. Sally, I heard what happened at Christmas. I just wanted you to know that I've always admired you for doing your own thing. I wish I had your courage. I'm getting divorced, have been separated for 6 months, but haven't told the family yet because I know how they'll react. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I'd love to meet Emma. That message made me realize that maybe I wasn't the only one who'd been feeling like an outsider in our family. Maybe I wasn't the only one who'd been hiding parts of my life to avoid judgment. Michael and I had long conversations about how to handle the situation. He was protective of both Emma and me, but he also understood the complicated nature of family relationships. They hurt you, he said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. They excluded you from important moments and made you feel like you weren't enough. You have every right to protect yourself and Emma from that. But they're still family, I said, though the words felt hollow. Family is what you make it, he replied. Blood relation doesn't give someone the right to treat you poorly. 3 weeks after Christmas, I got an unexpected visitor. I was working in my home office while Emma played in her bouncy seat when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Grandma Helen standing on my porch, looking smaller and frailer than I remembered. I hesitated for a long moment before opening the door. "Hello, dear," she said quietly. "I know I should have called first, but I was afraid you wouldn't want to see me." She was probably right, but something in her demeanor made me step aside and let her in. Emma immediately started babbling when she saw the new person, and I watched Grandma Helen's face transform as she laid eyes on her great-granddaughter for the first time. "Oh my," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "She's beautiful, Sally. She looks just like you did at that age." We sat in my living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Emma, oblivious to the tension, entertained herself with her toys while occasionally flashing her gummy smile at this new person. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas," Grandma Helen finally said, "about the things you said, about the way we've treated you. I think you were right." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I've spent so much time worrying about what other people would think about maintaining appearances and family traditions that I forgot the most important thing, actually loving my family as they are, not as I think they should be." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo album. "I brought something I thought you might want to see." The album was filled with pictures of me as a child, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. In every photo, I was beaming, clearly happy and loved. "You were such a joyful child," Grandma Helen said softly. "So creative and independent, and full of life." I don't know when I started seeing those qualities as problems instead of gifts. I felt tears prick at my eyes as I looked at the photos. I remembered being the happy little girl who believed her family thought she was wonderful just as she was. "I'm sorry, Sally," Grandma Helen said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough. I'm sorry for the comments about your weight and your job and your relationship status. I'm sorry for not including you in Jessica's shower. Most of all, I'm sorry that I made you feel like you had to hide the most important moments of your life from us." Emma chose that moment to crawl over to Grandma Helen, pulling herself up on her legs and babbling happily. Without hesitation, Grandma Helen picked her up, and Emma settled contentedly in her arms. "She's perfect," Grandma Helen whispered, "and so are you, dear. You've always been perfect exactly as you are. It wasn't a magic fix. Years of hurt don't heal in one conversation, but it was a beginning. Over the following months, things slowly started to change. Grandma Helen became Emma's most devoted great-grandmother, visiting every few weeks and always remembering to ask about my work and my interests, not just when I was going to give Emma a sibling. Mom took longer to come around, still struggling with the fact that I'd excluded her from such important moments. But gradually, she began to make an effort, asking about my design projects, offering to babysit Emma, and most importantly, stopping the constant commentary about my life choices. Dad, in his typical fashion, showed his acceptance through actions rather than words. He installed a new security system on our house and set up a college fund for Emma without being asked. Jessica was the hardest to forgive. Her apology felt performative at first, more about her guilt than genuine remorse for how she treated me. But when she had her son 4 months later and specifically asked me to be his godmother, I began to believe she was sincere. The real surprise came from my extended family. Lisa and I did grab that coffee, and it turned out she wasn't the only cousin who felt constrained by family expectations. We started having regular gatherings, the black sheep cousins, as we jokingly called ourselves, and our kids all became close friends. By Emma's first birthday, I had learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and reconciliation doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means creating something new, something healthier, something based on mutual respect rather than obligation. We had Emma's first birthday party in our backyard, with both sides of the family present. I watched Michael's parents playing with Emma while my parents chatted with my in-laws. I saw Jessica helping her toddler son navigate the slide while her husband talked shop with Michael. I observed Grandma Helen teaching Emma to clap her hands while surrounded by cousins who were finally free to be themselves. It wasn't the picture-perfect family gathering that Grandma Helen might have envisioned years ago. It was better. It was real. As the party wound down and we were cleaning up, Michael found me in the kitchen staring out the window at our daughter playing in her sandbox. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Just thinking about that Christmas dinner." I said about how scared I was to tell them the truth. "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. The past year had been complicated, rebuilding relationships, setting boundaries, learning to trust again. There had been awkward conversations, intense moments, and times when I wondered if it would have been easier to just keep them at arm's length forever. But then I looked out at Emma, who was now being pushed on her swing by Grandma Helen while giggling with pure joy. And I knew the answer. "No," I said. "No regrets at all." Standing up for myself that Christmas day had been terrifying, but it had also been necessary. It had forced my family to confront their behavior and make a choice, change, or lose me entirely. Some relationships had been damaged beyond repair, but others had been strengthened in ways I never could have imagined. Most importantly, I had learned that I was worthy of love and respect exactly as I was. I didn't need to earn my place at the family table by conforming to their expectations. I just needed to be brave enough to set my own table and invite people who truly wanted to be there. As Emma's laughter filled the evening air and Michael squeezed me tighter, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at people who hurt you. It's building such a beautiful life without them that they realize what they almost lost.